Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief McCloud from Rock Island PD in Illinois, 31 years experience in law enforcement and 25 years on the SISM team. So I'm really looking forward to having him on the show. Welcome, Chief McCloud. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I want to dive into two different things. One, 31 years is a long time to be in law enforcement, so I would love to get some of your background. And then 25 years is a really long time to be on the SISM team. So if you could just give us some context into your background, how you got started in law enforcement, and what those 31 years look like for you.
Well, I joined back in the early 90s. It was a pretty popular career choice back then. Cops was a new show and everybody wanted to become a cop. We had hundreds of people applying all the time. So I had a little bit of influences. My father had done some auxiliary police work, and then when I started dating my now wife in high school, her father was a sergeant on our local police department. And so I had a lot of influences. My best friend went into law enforcement. So it seemed like a natural thing for me to do. And I just never could picture myself just doing a regular 9 to 5 job. I wanted to be out there on the street, interacting with people and helping them if I could.
I love that. Okay, so I want to ask you a question, and this wasn't pre-planned at all, but you met your wife in high school.
Actually, fourth grade.
Oh, wow. And you
Yeah,
are still together.
we
And
are 30
you,
years.
wow. And you shared with me that you guys are going on a long weekend and you guys are having fun together. What is the secret of keeping a long and successful marriage in this career?
Well, I've been fortunate. Like I said, my wife, her father was in law enforcement, so she had a little bit of a insight into what that meant.
Okay.
And so, but it was a little different because I can remember as a young rookie, we'd get all together for family, and I couldn't wait to talk about all the exciting things I did out on the street, and we'd get together for dinner, and my father-in-law just put a stop to that right now. He says, "We don't talk about that at the dinner table or at home. You don't bring that at home." And so
Mm,
that was his perspective, and I respect it and I understand where he's coming from. But I think what's made my marriage work is that my wife understands that sometimes I need to talk to her about work. Now, I'll be the first to tell you I don't share everything with her. There's some things that she just doesn't need to hear about.
hmm
We see some pretty horrific things from time to time. So, but she calls me her bulletin board. So I would come home, just pin up a little note on the bulletin board about what happened that day, get it off my chest, and that's it, and it's done. It's really helped, I think, to know that our marriage is more of a partnership in that respect.
Yeah.
So it's not just me keeping everything from work from her, but at the same time, I'm not taking my work home and dumping it all on her as well. So.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that, a lot of people in this career struggle with that home balance. And we hear about this a lot, the work home balance and not bringing work home. But to your point, I think that it's really unrealistic to think that you're not going to bring anything home with you and to have a partnership where someone understands that there's going to be times where communication is necessary. And it's so helpful for you to be able to offload some of those things instead of burying them deep down and holding it in for 30 plus years.
Right.
I know your wife had a little bit of experience with, coming from a law enforcement household or, childhood, but do you think there's anything that maybe can be taught or maybe training that could help spouses who maybe didn't come from that background to be able to understand some of the challenges that you go through and to create that team environment at home?
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point. And as part of our wellness initiative that I've been working on this past year, I've added two new police chaplains to our ranks. We used to have three, we went down to one, and for the past 20 years almost, we've only had one. And one of the things I'd like to get implemented and haven't really got it off the ground yet is to kind of create an academy for the families. So
Mm.
when a police officer is new to the profession and they go off to 4 months of the academy, maybe we can meet with the family and the spouse and the children and explain a little bit about what's going to change. What are their significant others or their loved ones going to be going through and seeing on a day-to-day basis? And then how are they going to be when they come home? And so I think we should do a better job of preparing the families because, as we know, divorce runs rampant in the law enforcement career profession. So if you have that support system at home that understands what you're dealing with, then I think we can save a lot more marriages and basically increase that officer's wellness for his entire career.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think that that's a really unique perspective to have of like, how can we front load this and provide more resources, not just for the officer, but for the families too. So I think that that's great. I wanted to ask you, I know, us talking offline, wellness is something that's really important to you. You've obviously been a part of a CISM team for 25 years. As a chief, you're really trying to build wellness programming within your organization, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I'm curious to know, was there any moment in your career that was instrumental for you to make you prioritize wellness? Was there anything that impacted you personally?
Well, yeah, I'd say early on in my career, I was a young patrolman and I was working basically a part-time security job in uniform in a squad car for the local college. And we had another radio channel on our in our squad cars, and all of a sudden there was a lot of chatter. Everyone was going to a specific address that was very close to where I was, and I couldn't understand what was happening because they weren't putting the information out over the normal police radio. Um, and and so I just got on that other channel. I said, "What?" To one of my friends. I said, "What's going on?" And they still wouldn't tell me. Basically, just said, "Get there," and told me whose house it was, and it was the house of a retired detective, somebody that I had worked with, not super close, but I knew him, and had many conversations with him. Um, so I was only a few blocks away, got there before anyone else. No one told me what to expect. Um, and as soon as I walked in the front door, my first thing I saw was him sitting there, gun at his feet, and he had killed himself. Um, Now I don't have a great memory. Um, there's a lot of my career over the past 31 years that I don't remember, but I remember every detail of that moment.
Mm.
And I can tell you that I did what everybody did back then, and that's just okay. This is bad, but deal with it and move on. And you don't talk about it to anybody. You don't deal with it in any way other than just move on. And it wasn't until a few days later. In fact, I was at church, and um, another retiree was sitting right in front of me, and he had turned around and basically said, "Hey, I'm sorry to hear about what happened." Um, and for whatever reason, that's what triggered it for me.
Yeah.
Um, it just hit me out of nowhere, and I completely lost it. Um, and I didn't understand that, but it really made me realize just how human I am, and that how human we all are, and that we are susceptible to these issues if we don't pay attention to them. So that's probably the most impactful event, and then my realization of how you can be affected about something like that. And obviously, we know police officers go through much more traumatic things with officer-involved shootings and getting shot and things like that. So mine pales in comparison, but at least it made me understand a little bit more about how this job can really get to you.
Yeah. And I think you made a really good point of, we know that historically it was that mentality of suck it up,
Yeah.
keep going. Like this is a part of the job. And To a certain extent, of course it is, right? Like you are going to experience those things throughout your career. You are going to see really hard things and experience really traumatic events. But the aftermath of it, I think, looks different now than it did then. And you have that personal experience of realizing, like, wow, like maybe there is a better way of doing this instead of this mentality of suck it up. Maybe there are opportunities to be able to process and offload those things instead of just pushing them down. How do you think that that impacted the way that you lead and your, priority for wellness? Do you think that that was one of those key moments where you're like, this is important to me as a leader?
Well, absolutely. And I think it was only maybe a year or two later that I had the opportunity to become part of the critical incident stress debriefing team. And in doing so, that even opened my eyes to more. I was on teams with officers involved shootings, or just really critical incidents that officers, firefighters, dispatchers, EMT, everybody just needed to process. And that when they embrace that process of going through that, it's extremely helpful. And
Yeah.
you can see just how beneficial and just how they're working through it. Now I've been in on teams like that where no one wants to talk and it's just they almost feel forced to be there and they're just going through the motions and can't wait for it to be over. But I've also been on teams where people really open up and start healing, and so I just even more and more over the years started recognizing how important mental wellness can be in this profession. It's it can't be understated, or I'm sorry, overstated, as far as how important it can be when you're talking about decades of seeing horrific things.
Yeah. Do you think that it's saving lives?
Absolutely. I mean, beyond divorce and alcoholism, what else do we have? We have suicide. It's such a high rate. And I've seen it within our greater community here in the Quad Cities. And and once you've experienced something like that, and all you can do is ask yourself, what could I have done more? Well, so now let's do something more. Let's start focusing now on the front end and start making others aware that this is a reality that you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself uh, in many ways, not just mental. I think it all goes together. But yeah, definitely, I'm glad I'm in a position now to see if we can't really propel this forward.
Yeah. And I know you talked a little bit about, obviously the power of talking about these things, especially right after a critical incident, being able to process those things with your CISM team. You had also shared with me a few other things that you have done that have helped you throughout your career. Are you willing to share those things that have helped you?
Well, I don't think it's anything that's really unique to me or anything, but um, probably the most impactful has been my faith.
Yeah.
I have a strong faith basis, which I didn't have when I started as a police officer. In fact, it was another police officer that kind of spoke to me and witnessed to me about Christianity and helped get me on the right path. And as I've worked through many issues over the course of my career, I lean back on my faith as the probably the main focus about how I'm able to get through. Um, Physical fitness, I think, is also very important. I think everything they all go together. They all rely on one another. Your mental well-being improves as you're getting in shape. You know, you
Yeah.
have more confidence and you feel better about yourself and you leave that gym and feel like you did something. And so I'm no expert on that, but if people can work on both the mental, the physical, and the spiritual together, uh, all of them complement one another. So,
I agree. And I'm really happy that you started relating it to outcomes because I think sometimes when we start saying, yeah, prioritize your physical, prioritize your mental, your spiritual, your financial, there's that question of like, okay, but why? And so I'm really glad that you said because it impacts these things. It impacts your performance. It impacts your mood. It impacts your decision making, how you show up as a partner, as a parent, as a teammate, and so having that relate to the outcome, I think is really important. And that's something that I try to teach a lot. It's like sometimes if we can focus more on the outcome than on the actual like method, then sometimes that gets that ball going a little bit more, So I always use this example, like if you walked in and said, "Hey, like how many of you like want to eat better?" Maybe people are gonna be like, "I don't know," or like, but if you're like, "Hey, how many of you like want to have like improved mood, like more energy, like be less stressed," then people are gonna be like, "Yeah, like sign me up," So sometimes if you can attach to that, I think that that's really beneficial. I heard this thing the other day and I thought that this was really cool, and I want to see maybe what you think, but they said that wellness is a balancing act. Your whole life is a balancing act, this juggling act, if you will. And if you think about juggling these balls, you have work life, you have home life, you have your mental wellness, your physical wellness, your spiritual wellness, your financial wellness, all these things, nutritional, and you're juggling all of these balls. And the work light or the work ball is rubber, right? So if you drop the work ball, it'll bounce back,
Mhm.
right? And it's like the work will be there, and if you drop it and like, maybe it's not going to be that detrimental. But if you drop any other of the balls, because all the other balls are glass, and if you drop any other of these balls, your physical health, your mental health, your home life, your financial wellness, there might be a point where you drop one of those balls and they become cracked or they shatter. And if you don't have one of those, then it impacts everything else, right? And so I really liked this analogy of like you're juggling all these balls. And I think societally we've kind of, and I've done this in my life too, like we put so much focus on the work ball. And I'm not saying don't prioritize your work. I think your work is so important. And when you're there, like give it your all and be the best version of yourself. But sometimes it's at the detriment to all the other ones that you're juggling, and you start to break some of those things. You're breaking your mental health, you're breaking your home life. And then it's like, well, how can you show up for work if mentally you're not there? How can you get to the end of this career and retire if you didn't focus on your family life, and now you have nothing to go home to. And so I thought that that was really cool too, to kind of just recognize that sometimes we need something like that to understand where the priorities should lie in our juggling act, because it's always going to be a juggling act. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, I love that, and I completely agree. And how often do we define ourselves by our career?
Mm,
And so if you were to drop that rubber ball, and it's going to bounce back up. And a lot of people maybe get in trouble at work or they make a bad decision and there are some consequences, but they don't really realize it's not the end.
mm,
It's going to keep, you're going to take the hit and move on. And, and we all make mistakes. But yeah, like you said, juggling those other things, yeah, it does definitely impact everything else. If you are only defining yourself by your career, and I think it's a generational thing as well. I mean, when you're talking about living to work or working to live,
mm,
there's a shift now, and I can definitely see in this younger generation. I'm not faulting it, that they're paying closer attention to that work-life balance. Money isn't as important to them as their time away from the office, and that's good. Um, but it might be harder for someone like me, who was born in the mid to late 1900s, uh, to to understand that you know work mentality. But at the same time, I can also look back at times in my 30 plus years and see where I got things wrong.
mm.
It's I have that gift of hindsight that I do want to pass on to this younger generation. you were talking about, how it affects your family life. And I remember, there was a span of about 4 years where I was the rank of detective, and I was pretty stressed. I took it very seriously, I took my work home with me definitely. I was playing scenarios and interrogations in my head at night. Um, well, I many years later, I come to find out from my children, who are all now grown, um, that they remember me always being angry at
Mm.
that time. When I was a detective, I was always angry, and I don't really remember it that way. I do remember being stressed. I don't remember being angry, but obviously I was. So it's interesting. I'd love to be able to convey that kind of a wisdom on to the younger generation and say, don't make the mistakes I made.
Yeah, I really appreciate that self-assessment. I think that there's always room to grow and to do better and to learn from our challenges and our mistakes, as long as you're willing to have that self-reflection and say, how could I do better? How could I have done better? And how can I relay that to the next generation? And I think that that is sometimes something that's hard to teach. It's hard to teach people to like self-reflect. And I've definitely had moments in my life where I'm like, I did nothing wrong. It was everybody else around me, definitely not me. I was not the problem. And then you have those moments where you're like, wait, was I the problem? Or like, was there, even if you're not the problem, like, was there something I still maybe could have done better? Was there a way that I maybe could have communicated better? Or maybe I could have prioritized XYZ a little bit better. And so I think if you always have that growth mindset, it's going to take you far. And then you can influence other people in your life because now you have the opportunity to take those experiences and use those as educational opportunities.
Right, for sure.
So I know that you said, and you didn't say this, but I'm kind of encapsulating what you said. If we know better, we can do better,
Yeah,
right?
that's a good way of putting it.
And if it's predictable, it's preventable,
Hmm.
right? And so I think that that's kind of the space that a lot of leadership is in now. It's like, okay, like, we know that historically these things maybe didn't work as well in the wellness space. Sucking it up and shoving it down maybe wasn't the best strategy. So, how can we now do better because we know better? And then we are seeing the result of those things, right? We're seeing suicide, we're seeing divorce rates. You mentioned alcoholism, like that unhealthy coping mechanisms of escaping and numbing.
Right.
And if those behaviors and those outcomes are predictable, then they're preventable. Those are things that we can get in front of and we can start putting in place resources to reduce those things. And I know you told me that when you came into this position as chief, that was a priority for you to build a new wellness program that really prioritized the wellness of your team. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the strategies and the things that you have implemented and or things that you are in the process of implementing?
Well, it's definitely been an ongoing process. I've been chief now for just about 14 months.
Mhm.
So it's been a little bit piecemeal where we're just adding more and more things to it. I kind of started with wanting to do a department family cookout. I know it seems kind of minor, but back in the 90s, we used to do these types of things where we'd get together with our families. We'd do a fishing trip, or we'd go to, just we even took all the spouses and children out to the range, and just got together a little bit, and we have food and activities and games and things like that. So we started that last year, invited the retirees to start bringing them back in, so they're not just out there by themselves. And we're getting ready to organize our second annual one. But then I started by forming a wellness committee. And it was obvious that there are people that are concerned about this because I had 15 people that jumped on the committee, and they have a lot of ideas, and because this isn't just a one-man show. I
Right.
really want to have that involvement and say, well, what do you think we need and how do you think we can get there? So we've had a lot of good input on that. We're considering different things. Um, I think I'm focused a little bit more on the mental aspect of it than the rest of the committee sometimes because I've seen how that can really affect you long term. But we recently partnered with the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police. They have a program called We Never Walk Alone.
Mhm.
And it basically provides these um, mental health resources, trained peer supporters and psychologists and everybody. They get access to confidential and for us, we're the department's paying for it, so free for the employees access through web-based or an app.
Yeah.
So we already had through the city our what most cities have an EAP program, and an employee assistance program. But I know that there are some concerns that people think that even though it is confidential, they think that the city's going to somehow find out about it. And
Right.
so they're really resistant to it. This is completely not associated directly with our city. And so gives them that opportunity. And they can, from an app, they can even reach out to somebody while they're in their squad car if they needed to. So it's something we just started. As part of that program, we agree to uh, provide peer supporters as well. So now the next step is for us to get some of our own employees trained up as being peer support and then add to their network. So we're working towards that step. Um, but I mean I like the physical aspect. I was recently meeting with our we have a nurse practitioner here at the city, which is a great benefit. And not a lot of cities have that. And the city already has its own wellness initiative where you go and you can get some blood work done and take a look at where you're sitting and what you need to do.
Yeah.
But what I want to take that as a step further and maybe provide some kind of incentive program for individual goals for each employee that wants to participate, completely voluntary. You go there and you determine, well, what do I need? Do I need to lose 10 pounds? Do I need to stop smoking? Do I need to get my cholesterol down, and change my blood work? Or maybe you're already pretty healthy and you just want to have some better results in the gym, but set those goals and work to achieve them and then maybe have a bonus at the end of that or however that's going to work. Um, haven't quite worked through all that yet. I gotta maybe try to find some grant funding or something to see how that can work.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've tried. We've been doing incrementally little things. We can't really have our own comfort dog, therapy dog here at the station, and we're not in a position to do that right now. But been partnered with a local company, and they've been bringing by this great dog on a regular basis and meeting with everybody and just hanging out, things like that. It's I, I I want to have all these resources available for people so they start realizing that we are supporting them in that way. There's a local mental health advocacy group called the Gray Matters. Partnered with them for their first responder chapter that and provide them the space here at the station to use if they want. So it's been a process. There's a lot of little things. There's a local mental health provider that focuses on first responders, connecting them with all of our employees. Things like that. So I want it to be comprehensive, but it wasn't happening overnight for
Right. Well, and small steps create lasting change. I truly believe that. And I think that that can go in the context of organizationally, like you said, incremental. How can we take these small steps so that over time it's going to have a lasting impact on our people? But then I think also from a personal perspective, to your point, how can you start to set those goals and make those small steps for yourself over time? And
Mhm.
and it's that old adage of like, what is it, like slow wins the race? It's the
Yeah,
tortoise and the hare,
right.
because I think that sometimes we think that, especially type A personality, right? I can completely relate to that of like, if we're going to do it, we're going to go all in and we're going to go hard, and I think that a lot of times you start to see like the burnout in that. And so I think if you can start to set realistic goals for yourself, if you can just put one foot in front of the other, then the long-term effect is going to be much greater. And so I I wrote this down because I'm like, you got to stop saying the 90s and 1900s. Like, I feel like the old lady in the room. It was so funny. I saw this thing on like social media or something where um, they were like interviewing the younger generation and they're like, what age is old or what year would you be born in for like someone to be old? And they said like, anything in the 1900s, like something like that you said, and I was like, whoa, like I feel personally attacked by that. And then I had someone was like, yeah, like 2005, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, like now I'm sad. Now I'm definitely the old lady in the room, but I thought that was hilarious.
Yes.
But I do agree with you that there's so much power in connection, in community, and sometimes it's those small reminders that do make such a huge impact on wellness. And I love that you're focusing on like, how can we get people together? How can we do a cookout? How can we just like build those relationships together? And the fact that you also include retirees, I think is so good. We know that it's such a hard transition for a lot of people. Not everybody, but a lot of people. You spend 25, 35 years in this career, and then one day you leave, and it's like you lose that connection to the department and the people, and you lose a little sense of value, I think. And so to recognize them and say, hey, you're still a part of the team. We still value you. We want you to be a part of our community and our department long term, even into retirement, I think is a huge message to be sending. So I appreciate that focus a lot.
Yeah, as someone who's getting closer to the end of his career, I mean, I've got some years left in me, but at the same time, I recognize that that's going to be a real issue for probably myself. Find purpose and find a reason to identify myself other than police officer. So,
Right. So I know we are talking a little bit about the younger generation coming in, and there's a challenge right now with recruitment and retention. And, maybe there aren't as many people who are signing up for this career, but then also we're seeing that maybe they aren't staying as long in this career as historically. And there's a lot of lateral movement and things going on within the organization. What are you seeing as far as recruitment, retention, and do you think that wellness is something that is benefiting retention, that is one of those outcomes if we prioritize wellness that we can then at least, benefit retention?
yeah, I think it has to be an important component of retention. Wellness does. Because it's a completely different type of work environment than it used to be. I mean, when I started, it was everybody wanted to become a cop, and I never would have thought in my wildest dreams that uh, we would have such an issue getting qualified candidates into this profession. And everyone's struggling. It's not just our department, obviously. We're all hiring multiple times a year, trying to get people in. Um, but I do see that also this new generation of officers, they have options that we didn't have. And so where every department is hiring, you can just lateral over to another department if you don't like the way things are going.
Yeah.
And so that makes departments more competitive to offer the best environment for their personnel. And it might not be just what you as a department offer, but it might depend on what the officers are experiencing out there on the street. A small town's not going to have some of the issues that a larger town has. And so it all depends on what were their expectations in coming into this career. And most of the time, no one is really fully prepared for what they're going to, encounter as a police officer out in the street. It's always an eye-opening experience. But then maybe your priorities change And after a few years of dealing with the really hard stuff, maybe you decide, this isn't quite for me. It's not what I thought it was going to be. Now, back in my day, we would have just toughed it out for a while, tried to get promoted, tried to go to something else to where you're not dealing with the same issues. But now you can just pick up and go to another department, and they'll hire you just like that.
Yeah.
So it's a different environment, and it's hard to recruit, it's hard to retain, and it's hard to maintain staffing levels. So the problem continues to compound on itself. So now we have less and less people that we can count on to be here. Our staffing levels are at minimum all the time. And so that wears on people. They get burned out. They're forced overtime. They're tired. They don't want to uh, go out there and be as proactive as they would normally be if they had a full shift and they could get the time off that they want.
Right.
So, yeah, it's definitely an issue that I never thought we would be dealing with. But I also would say that I think I'm starting to see it swing back. After COVID and, George Floyd, we really saw quite a drop off as everyone did around the country. And it's still a struggle, but we're starting to see more applications come in than we have in the past. We're starting to send more people to the academy and get through the whole process. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it's going to come back around and get to the point where people recognize what an amazing career this is. What a completely, it's different than anything else. You're gonna every day is going to be different, and it's so rewarding that you can't necessarily understand it until you have the opportunity to be on it for years and can look back.
Yeah. No, I agree with you that it's as far as like the retention piece of it and the recruitment piece of it, it's a snowball effect, right? It's like you have like you said, if people are working overtime, then they're more stressed, they're more burnt out, they're not at home as much. And so there's more strain on the family. And so they're not going to be prioritizing their wellness maybe as much as they would if they did have that space to have that time off. And so it is kind of this like snowball effect that's happening. But I also agree with you in the conversations that I've had that I think that the last 5 years have been tough,
Yeah,
but I do think that we're seeing the community rally around this profession more. And I think the efforts that you're making to really showcase, the work that you do and the community engagement and, really showing people that just because there are some incidents that are not great. It's not a reflection of everybody, and that this is still an admirable career to be in. And people do want to be in this career. There's young people that look up to you guys and they want to be you, and you inspire people. So I agree with you. I think that things are starting to shift. And so my hope is that you'll start to see more applicants come through your doors and we'll start to shift that a little bit. But
yeah, definitely.
my last question for you is what words of wisdom would you share with the younger generation? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
Wow. Well, as someone who looks back on decades of work, it's easy for me to say it goes by fast. So I try to tell a lot of these younger officers that are in a hurry. It seems like they're very much in a hurry to get promoted. And I don't think they quite understand that once you get promoted and get off the street, you lose that interaction that and you're going to be you're making memories now. You're involved in things that you'll talk about for the rest of your life. But once you get out of that role, it's harder to have those impactful moments. And so slow down. That's what I tell them. Is that it's okay. You're going to get there. It's understandable that you want to go to the next thing, and I've been guilty of that myself. Um, but just enjoy it. Enjoy it where you're at. I know we can become cynical. You have 4 to 5 negative contacts a day. That's hundreds a year, and that's going to wear on you. That's going to take its toll. I get it. But there are those good moments, and you focus on those, and before you know it, you're going to be like me. You're going to be looking back a whole career and you remember the good moments. So
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I thought that those were great words of wisdom and something I can definitely relate to in my life too. I think sometimes we're in such a hurry and you don't realize some of the greatest moments of your life until they're over. And then
yeah,
you look back and you're like, man, I wish that I would have just taken the moment to recognize that and be fully present in those moments because you're right. You blink and it's over and it's crazy. And I feel like the older I get, the faster time goes. And so, I think that that's great. Those are great words of wisdom for someone who's younger, because I definitely think that that introspection and, being able to have that moment of like slow down comes with age and experience and having that moment of like reflection of like, man, I wish. Whereas when you're younger, maybe you don't think of those things. So I really appreciate that. And thank you for all you're doing for your organization. And I really am looking forward to seeing how your wellness program develops over time. Well, maybe have to do like a part two at some point so we can share all the great things you're doing in the future.
absolutely. Thanks for having me, Paige. It's been great.
Of course. Thank you.